Hey everybody, this is ODD of ODD TV, Odd Reality, and I am here with Edward Hendrie, the author of several books, including 9/11, Enemies Foreign and Domestic, Solving the Mysteries of Babylon the Great, Bloody Zion, and The Greatest Lie on Earth, Proof that Our World is Not a Moving Globe. He's an amazing researcher with a gift of being able to write easy-to-digest books that are packed full of information. Personally, I've read The Greatest Lie on Earth, and that's why we're here today. We will be going over our level and stationary Earth, the subject of the Jews and the Jesuits and many other things. And I want to say that, when we bring up the Jews, we're not saying every single Jew on Earth is responsible for the problems that we have, but what we have traced and noticed is that the elite, powerful Jews that are wealthy and stuff, they have a lot of pull and a lot of control over what's going on in our world. And it's easy to see, and it's kind of hard to admit or talk about because, it's just one of those taboo things. It's like calling out a whole race. So that's not what we're trying to do. I look at Jews like a religion. If you practice Judaism, all that stuff, either way, we're going to be going over Jews, Jesuits, Flat Earth, and a lot of other stuff. So thanks for tuning in, and let's get started. Edward, glad to finally have you on. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I typed up a few questions. That's what I like to do in my interviews. I just like to be prepared. So I'm going to be going over these questions, but of course, with what I got written down, we could go off a little bit off tangent or whatever. So here's my first question. Can we get a brief introduction about your life as a researcher? When did you wake up to the lies of the world, and what was it that got you going?
Well, first of all, what got me going was I was saved by the grace of God through faith in Jesus Christ. And along with salvation comes what is known as the unction of the Holy Spirit. And with that unction comes understanding. And God's revealed to me a lot of the conspiracies in this world. My eyes were now opened, okay? When I started reading the Bible, it became clear to me, first of all, that the religion that I was in, Roman Catholicism, was reflected in the Bible very clearly through the actions and what Jesus said about the Pharisees. There seemed to be a parallel. And I realized very quickly that the religion of Christianity was very different from Roman Catholicism. So that was the first thing that was revealed to me. And then I began researching Roman Catholicism and came to understand many of the other conspiracies in this world. A lot of people use the term conspiracy theory. Most don't understand that term, conspiracy theory, was actually coined by the CIA as a way of denigrating those who were researching the conspiracy behind the assassination of John Kennedy. They wanted to put a stop to anybody delving into that, so they wanted to discredit the researchers. And so in order to attack their credibility, they labeled them as conspiracy theorists. And that's a label that's being used even today for anybody who views the events in the world as a product of a conspiracy. But that's how I got started.
So that's like a project. Is that Project Mockingbird, where the CIA coined the term?
Well, Project Mockingbird was actually where they paid radio and television personalities to parrot the government line. So they were using them as tools to propagandize the population, which they do even today. I mean, that was just one that was uncovered, but that process goes on today. It has continued.
Absolutely, I see it. So, with that introduction, let's dive right in. a lot of people out there have read your book. If anybody is looking into the flat Earth and you're researching, wondering what's going on with the shape of the Earth, like many have in the past couple of years, then I'm sure you've come across Edward Hendrie's book, The Greatest Lie on Earth. So I want to know, how long were you looking into the flat Earth before understanding that it was the truth?
Well, that's funny. I was looking on YouTube and I came across a video, and the video was called Flat Earth Conspiracy. I believe it was posted by Eric Dubay, and it was sort of an amalgam of a bunch of different other videos that he had put together. And part of the video was done by a guy named Rory Cooper, and he had a YouTube channel called My Perspective. And he has subsequently removed his videos, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But what Rory Cooper revealed in there was so clear to me that what he was saying was true. I was amazed. So I'm watching this video thinking to myself when I first started watching that in my mind, oh, I get it. There's a conspiracy to portray the world as flat in order to discredit those who are investigating the other government conspiracies. That was my initial thought. But when I looked at it, then I realized, well, wait a minute, no. This is not at all that. There actually is a flat Earth. Now, I checked out what he was saying. I began to research, and everything I researched and found confirmed what Rory Cooper had said. And I'm looking at this, and at every turn, it checked out. I did the equations. I looked at other videos. I looked at I did independent research, and by golly, I concluded, yes, the world is flat. There is a conspiracy to conceal the flat Earth. And so I started talking to my father, who now is 90 years old, and he was in disbelief. He didn't believe me, and he asked some very good questions. So I would explain to him the level of drop from the horizon and how, many things we see should be below the horizon. And so he challenged me on the accuracy of my calculations, which caused me to go to the Pythagorean theorem and confirm that, in fact, the 8 inches per mile squared is accurate. And I was able to do it. And that's why that's one of the very first things I did in the book, because that was done to show my father that, in fact, it is accurate to calculate the alleged drop on a spherical Earth to be 8 inches per mile squared. So that started me going, and then I looked at Rowbotham's research and others, and I quote Rowbotham in my book. He did some excellent work, and I started from there and just started researching and documenting what I found. And what I found confirmed at every turn that this Earth is flat. And I was astounded at the clarity and the irrefutability of the evidence.
Absolutely. That's the same thing that happened with me. You were just saying something about Rory Cooper. I'm very fond of his work, but I don't have any information on what's going on with him or why he's taking his videos down. Do you have any kind of information on that?
I've sent him an email and asked him about it, and he was rather cryptic in his explanation. Apparently, he didn't want to go into detail, and he didn't. He simply, said that he wanted to set that aside and focus on other aspects of his religious activity. Now, I don't know why he couldn't have just left the videos up, because they are so important. He also had a lot of other videos that were excellent, I thought, that he had previously taken down as well and replaced with others. I don't understand why, whether he's under pressure, I don't know. There's a lot that comes along with taking a stand for the flat earth. A lot of people have suffered and are put under a lot of pressure to back away from the flat earth. And maybe there was pressure put on him. I don't know. But he was rather cryptic in his explanation to me. And I didn't speak with him over the telephone. It was all over email.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it happen. It's pretty tough doing this. I've seen it happen with BS detector. A lot of you guys out there are familiar with that.
What happened with him? I'm not familiar with that.
He was a kind of guy. He came on. I think he edited his voice to sound low, but it was kind of cool. But I think he was obviously taking precautions to cover his tracks, or his identity at least, so his videos couldn't be traced. I think he was doing a great job. He had about 15 to 20 videos, and after 3 or 4 months of YouTubing, maybe a little longer, he just up and vanished. If you went to the channel, it said this user has shut their channel down. So that's different from what we usually see. Like, this account has been terminated, so,
right.
Another channel that I have a friend named Kirk. He's from Curious Life of a Flat Earther. He took his channel down, but he put it back up, renamed it Curious Life. So shout out to Kirk. He does a great job. Check him out if you get a chance. Now, your Flat Earth book, The Greatest Lie on Earth, is very impressive, with 27 chapters taking up over 400 pages. How long did it take you to gather all of that information and complete the book?
I worked pretty steadily for around 6 months, and that was in pretty feverish work at the time, and got it out pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, because I mean, you separate it. The chapters speak for themselves, so they're all dedicated to one certain aspect of the flat Earth, or how NASA lies, or whatever. And I mean, it was just a great job organizing the book. I can't imagine it being anything less than a year, but obviously you did it in 6 months, so that's really wonderful. But you have experience, and you've written other books, so I'm sure you kind of got your own process down.
Yeah. What takes the time is virtually everything in that book is endnoted, so I have authority for everything I say. And that's what really takes the time, is to make sure that I have my authority straight, and that people can rely on what is said. It's just on me saying it. So to substantiate things is important.
Absolutely. So, being well versed in all the information, you really get better at being able to go out and basically debate on the spot once you've researched something long enough, and you're very well versed on this. So I want to ask you, how would you kind of quickly summarize the conspiracy to hide the flat Earth, as far as when it started, why it started, and who may be involved?
Okay. Well, this conspiracy started at first in the Garden of Eden, where Satan himself wants to drive from man any knowledge of God. And the idea here is that if we are on a globe, which is one of millions of globes that are spinning in an endless space, then we are reduced to insignificance. And if above us is not heaven, but rather empty, the empty vacuum of space, what that does is that removes God from his throne. The Bible states that heaven is his throne and the earth is his footstool. Well, if you go up beyond our atmosphere, and when you arrive there, there's nothing but empty space, what does that do? That removes God from the minds of men. Well, when we look up into heaven, it's an empty vacuum of space. There's no God up there. And so that's the idea here. The idea is to conceal the existence of God. Can you imagine if people understood that, in fact, we live on a flat earth, and that we are covered with a firmament of a dome, just as the Bible states, and that we are unique in creation, and that the stars are in the firmament, that they are not far away, not distant, that above the firmament is heaven, God's throne, and that he's watching over us. People would change their conduct, everything would change, and you would have less crime. People would want to find answers. Who is God? Okay, they would want to know, why are we here? They would want to know about God's creation. Well, if you can remove from the minds of men the existence of God and portray us as a spinning ball, and that we are not the center of creation, but we have a sun. The sun is the center of a solar system of planets. And the sun is an insignificant sun compared to many, many other suns that we can only see. They're so far away as the twinkling of stars. What we call stars are actually suns, which is not true, but that's how it's portrayed to us. So what it does is it has the effect of removing from the minds of men the existence of God. And so this conspiracy goes back even to the Garden of Eden. In order to control men, they have to remove from the minds of men the existence of God. That's the idea here.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. My life has changed because of the flat Earth. I could say I was an atheist before, and I've kind of battled and gone back and forth with Christianity at times early on in my life, and then there came a point where I went back to atheism, and I was like, all right, I'm staying here for good, and a few years later, this flat Earth changed my life because I see things similar to that. I still question, is everything in the Bible correct, or has it been tampered with, stuff like that. But I think I'm going further and further each day, getting closer to what my path is leading me somewhere on purpose, and I'm anxious to see where I end up and what exactly I believe in after that. But so we basically covered there how it got started, and why. But nowadays, let's talk modernly, since this has really gone on for the noticeable past 500 years, who are the people perpetrating this lie against us?
Let's start with Copernicus, okay? He lived in the 1500s. He was born in 1473. And he was not a revolutionary discovery of a new heliocentric astronomy, as many people think. He actually borrowed much of what he wrote from Pythagoras. Now, Pythagoras lived 500 BC. And so he was simply bringing to the fore what Pythagoras had written about, 500 years before Christ's birth. So he actually was just bringing out ancient knowledge. Now, who was Pythagoras? Well, Pythagoras was a Kabbalist, okay? He was one who was imbued with Kabbalistic knowledge from the Jews who had been released from Babylonian captivity. And so this is witchcraft is what it is, okay? And so the idea of Copernicus being the source of this, and he's given credit for it. In fact, it goes back much further to Pythagoras. And if you understand how Pythagoras came up with it, he got it from the Jews who were released from their Babylonian captivity. This is Babylonian lore, okay, mysticism, witchcraft, which is now portrayed as science, okay? Now, we fast forward to Newton, okay, and Newton he came up with this idea of gravity in order to explain the many objections to this system where we're spinning around the sun. How can that be? How can somebody be standing on a globe which is spinning at 1,000 miles per hour and not fly off the globe through centrifugal force? Because people knew that this doesn't make sense. How can that be? So Newton came up with this concept of gravity. Again, that is mysticism. It's not science. Okay. Now, he was also a Kabbalist. He read Hebrew. He did a lot of study in the Kabbalah and the Talmud. Okay. And in fact, his writings are digitalized, and they are now in Israel's National Library at Hebrew University. And there's a reason for that. You see, they don't want it to be known the source behind gravity and heliocentricity. Okay. This is actually a religion. This is a religious doctrine being cloaked in science. It's being portrayed as scientific because gravity has never been proven. Gravity is a theory. And in fact, if you examine the theory of gravity, it really makes no sense. Because if gravity was the basis for people to stand on the earth and be able to stand upside down and not be flying off with the spin of the earth, gravity is based on the mass of the earth. And the gravitational pull is supposed to be equal all over the earth. So there's equal pull based on the mass, not based on the spin of the earth. Well, therein lies the problem. And therein lies the proof that it can't possibly be true. Because if the idea behind gravity is that it's supposed to work against the centrifugal force, if you were at the equator, then the centrifugal force would be much greater because you're traveling at 1,000 miles per hour than it would be if you were further north or further south of the equator. Your weight would be different. And goodness, if you were close to either pole, you'd be crushed by the weight of the gravity because there would be hardly any centrifugal force as you get close to the pole. And as we know, you're not crushed when you go north or south of the equator. Your weight remains relatively the same. And so this idea of gravity being the force that works against centrifugal force by the spin of the earth is a myth. And people don't think about it, but it makes no sense. The reason that we don't fly off into space is because we're not spinning. It's a flat earth. And the reason we are able to stand on the ground is because we are denser than air. Things fall to the ground because of density. Things that are denser than air fall to the ground. However, if you have something lighter than air, like helium, it will float. Now, it doesn't float because it's some anti-gravity device. It floats because it's lighter than air. And so here we have an instance where science tells us why we don't fly up into space. It's because we are denser than air. Very simple. It has nothing to do with gravity because we are not on a spinning globe. We are on a flat, stationary Earth.
You nailed it. That's absolutely 100% a fact. That was a good one. So, you know a thing or two when it comes to the Jews, the Jesuits, and the Roman Catholic Church. For people out there that really don't understand how they are all tied together, can you give us a brief rundown?
Yeah. When we talk about the Roman Catholic Church, understand that at the beginning of Christianity, the Jews were trying to undermine the Christians, and they were trying to Judaize Christianity. See, salvation is by the grace of God through faith in Jesus Christ. It does not require works. You cannot earn salvation through works. Whereas all other religions, particularly Judaism, requires works for salvation. Okay? You have to do good works in order to earn salvation. Well, Jesus Christ came as a propitiation for our sins. That is, to pay the price for our sins. If you believe in Jesus Christ, then your sins will be paid for by him. And you do good works because of salvation, not to earn salvation, you see. And under Judaism, it's a religion based on salvation also by race. Well, Jesus said that he came to break down the door that separated Gentile from Jew. And so now there's no distinction between Gentile and Jew in God's kingdom. Salvation is by the grace of God through faith in Jesus Christ, regardless of whether you're Gentile or Jew. This racial distinction is a distinction which is something the Jews cling to, okay? But God has said he has wiped that out. So with the Roman Catholic Church, what the Jews were able to do is bring a lot of their traditions and create a false Christianity that basically had Judaism as its theology at its core. For example, the Jews have the Sanhedrin, okay? And the Sanhedrin were the 70 elders of the Jewish religion. Those 70 elders were called the chief priests, and they would elect the person known as the high priest. Well, in the Roman Catholic Church, they have the College of Cardinals. What does cardinal mean? It means chief. What are they? They are priests. They are the chief priests, you see. But they conceal it in a language that is not understood. All witchcraft has cryptic language which conceals the true meaning. And so the meaning of cardinal is chief priest. So they are the chief priests, the ancient chief priests of the Sanhedrin. They elect the high priest. Who's the high priest? The Pope. The Pope, it now sits in the station of what was formerly known as the high priest. See? So Roman Catholicism is basically Judaism for Gentiles. The Mass, where they have a ceremony, where they sacrifice through their Catholic Mass Christ every week or every time they say Mass. Well, Jesus made it clear. He was sacrificed once for all time. There's no need for another sacrifice. His sacrifice was sufficient for our sins. But the Roman Catholic Church says, no, we have to do it over and over again. And what they do is it's a humiliation. It blasphemes Christ. It's a very hateful ceremony. That's the esoteric meaning behind the Mass. They have an open meaning, an exoteric that they explain, saying that it is a ceremonial reconstitution of the Mass. But if the esoteric meaning is it's a re-crucifixion of Christ, an unbloody sacrifice, okay, that acts as a propitiation for our sins. Well, that contradicts what Jesus says in the Bible. And in fact, at every turn of the page of the Bible, you see a refutation of the Roman Catholic theology. And the Roman Catholic theology comes straight from Judaism.
Absolutely. So how would we, they created the Jesuits, right? The Jews are responsible for the creation of the Jesuits. How do they serve? What kind of purpose do they serve?
Okay, the Jesuits are what is known as crypto-Jews, okay, concealed Jews. And there are many that would conceal their Judaism in order to further their ends in a Gentile world. So there are many, even today, who are crypto-Jews that conceal their Judaism in order for it not to be known generally. I mean, we see that with, for example, John Kerry. It was revealed that in fact he's Jewish, and he said, "Gee, I didn't know that." He acts as though he's surprised. Well, he's a crypto-Jew. There are a lot of people like that to conceal their Judaism. Well, that's basically what we're dealing with the Jesuits. The Jesuits were started by Ignatius of Loyola, who was a crypto-Jew, okay? And their function within the Catholic Church is a Catholic order. They're a unique Catholic order and very powerful in that they are independent of the local cardinal. So the Jesuits, by their constitution, they are only answerable to the Pope. However, even though they're answerable to the Pope, the Black Pope, that is the Jesuit general, actually has authority over the white pope, who's the pontiff of the Roman Catholic Church. They're very powerful within the Roman Catholic Church. They have great control. They controlled the Council of Trent, which had curse after curse against Christian doctrine and against Christians in general. The idea of salvation by the grace of God through faith in Jesus Christ, which is the very theme of the Bible, was one of the things that they cursed. Now, give you an example of their power. Pope Benedict, the 16th confessor's Jesuit general Adolfo Nicholas. Okay, now he resigned as pope, almost certainly under the advice of his confessor, the Jesuit general. A Jesuit is always the confessor for the pope. They're very deceptive. In fact, if you look up the word Jesuitical in the Oxford Dictionary or any dictionary, it means to dissemble, to equivocate, as in a manner once associated with, and I say once associated with the Jesuits. Well, in fact, that is what the Jesuits are about. Okay. In fact, to give you an idea of how the Jesuits feel with regard to the Bible, Hector McPherson quotes from a Jesuit meeting in 1825, and here's a quote. It says, "Then the Bible, that serpent with head erect and eyes flashing, threatens us, the Jesuits, with its venom while it trails along the ground, shall be changed into a rod as soon as we, the Jesuits, are able to seize it." And it goes on and on. And they hate the Bible. They rail against it, okay? And they are very dangerous. In fact, the Roman Catholics were so dangerous that and had created so many revolutions over time that the Roman Catholic Church suppressed the Jesuits, which caused a revolution against the Vatican, fomented by the Jesuits in the guise of what we call now the Illuminati. They were very much closely related. And they were reinstated in 1814 after having been suppressed. And John Adams wrote to Thomas Jefferson, "I am not happy about the rebirth of the Jesuits." Now, by the way, they were suppressed by the Pope out of political pressure. There was tremendous political pressure brought by the monarchies of Europe to suppress the Jesuits, and that's why it was done. But it only lasted about 50 years, and then they were reinstated, and they have fomented revolutions since their reinstatement in Italy and Spain, in Germany, in Guatemala, Mexico, Brazil. And I'm talking, this is within the last century. Brazil was in 1874, Ecuador in 1875, Colombia 1875, Costa Rica in 1884, etc. Okay. In fact, in Switzerland, from about 1848 until the year 2000, the Swiss Constitution had an Article 51 which forbade the Jesuits from engaging in any cultural educational activities within Switzerland. So they're very dangerous. They, in fact, were behind the gunpowder plot, which to this day is celebrated on November 5th in England as Guy Fawkes Day. And the reason they celebrate Guy Fawkes Day, it's a national holiday in England because the Roman Catholic conspiracy to blow up Parliament was foiled, and they were able to trace it directly to the Jesuits. People lose sight of the fact that that was a Jesuit plot against Protestant England. They wanted to blow up the king and all of Parliament.
That is crazy. Yeah, I've looked into that stuff. It is definitely, it's a lot to take in. That's why I was happy to have you on, because you have a lot of, good research into this stuff. And that's why a lot of these questions focus on that. So we know, okay, Catholic Church, Jews, okay, Jesuits, Jews. Another powerful organization that seems to pull a lot of weight, even though on the scale of the power pyramid is probably not, very close to the top, is the Freemasons. What do you think? Is Freemasonry a creation of the Jews?
It is. It is actually a front by the Jews. If you read the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, which I believe are authentic, okay, and they use, and they explain in there that they use Freemasonry as a cloak for their conduct, for their conspiracy, and it's a cover, and they say so. They say in one of their protocols, Gentile Masonry blindly serves as a screen for us and our objectives, but the plan of action of our force, even its very abiding place, remains for the whole people in unknown mystery. So it is a cloak for their activity. Now understand, with Freemasonry is heathenism, which also Judaism is. The god of Freemasonry is Lucifer. And so when you look into Freemasonry, you'll see that it also leads right back to the Kabbalah. So in fact, Albert Pike states in Morals and Dogma, Masonry is a search for light that leads us directly back to the Kabbalah. Okay. Albert Mackey, in his authoritative Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, confirms what Albert Pike states, and he says that the Kabbalah is the mystical philosophy or theosophy of the Jews. It's intimately connected with the symbolic science of Freemasonry. So Freemasonry is based on Judaism and the secret doctrine of the Kabbalah. The god of Freemasons is Lucifer, and they are, you'll find, involved in NASA very deeply, okay? Just to give you an idea, the manager of the Apollo program and command and service modules and deputy manager for the Gemini project was a guy named Kenneth Kleinneck, and he was a 33-degree Mason. He was the brother of Fred Kleinneck, who was the sovereign grand master of the Supreme Council, Mother Council of the World, Southern Jurisdiction of Freemasonry. And he, in the New Age article, Kenneth Kleinneck stated, now, how many of the astronauts themselves are Brother Masons? And he lists Edward Aldrin, Gordon Cooper, Don Eisler, Walter Schirra, Tom Stafford, Ed Mitchell, Paul Weitz. So a very significant plurality of the astronauts and the administrators of NASA are, in fact, Freemasons. So when you look at the deception of NASA, you see Freemasonry very closely underneath as far as the management level and the astronauts themselves.
Yeah, that is so wild. I just can't believe that. So the Freemasons worship Lucifer, and so that means the Jews worship Lucifer. Jews have infiltrated the Vatican, and they got the world's biggest telescope, and they named it Lucifer. How about that? That's pretty crazy, huh?
Yeah. How about that? And,
I mean, it's just unbelievable, you know.
They put it right in your face.
Yeah, here's one thing I get confused on, and I've been wanting to ask you this. In the Bible, the Star of David is not referenced anywhere, but the Star of Remphan is. And I'm certain that the Star of Remphan is what's now called the Star of David. But the thing is that Remphan is another name for Saturn. And Saturn, that's what I could trace it to as Saturn. But when then you start looking into what Saturn means, Saturn seems to have so many different names and elements throughout history. I wonder what the relevancy truly is when it comes to Saturn, and if Saturn, Satan, Lucifer, etc. really are the same entity. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, when you start looking into the occult things, you find some very disturbing things. So, with regard to the Star of Remphan, I have not yet been able to find proof that it is the Star of David, although I have a strong suspicion that it is. Until such time as I actually have the proof, I'm going to hold off on giving an opinion on that because I don't have the proof. I only like to say things if I have proof. So until I see the evidence, then I'm going to hold off. But I do suspect and anything, any investigation starts with a suspicion, but I haven't yet come up with the proof. And so I would hesitate to go out on a limb and say that, yes, the Star of Remphan is the Star of David that is now the symbol of the Jewish, power, okay, which was first indicated with Rothschild. I can't say that. So I don't know. But what I can tell you is this idea of trying to conceal the flat earth is brought about because they do serve a heathen god, and all of these gods, even Apollo it's another name for the devil. Okay, they even name their rockets after heathen gods. Why? Well, if you read the Bible, it says the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead. So that's that. And I'm quoting from Romans chapter 1. So you see, the flat earth reveals the invisible things of God to man. Satan can't have that. He can't have that revealed to man. He must conceal that, you see. And so a good revelation of this is in the book by George Orwell, 1984. There's a passage in there where O'Brien is speaking with Winston Smith, who apparently is being tortured by O'Brien, who is part of the government conspiracy. And he tells Winston Smith that we control matter because we control the mind. Now, that is so significant. That is so significant because if you understand what 1984 is, it's a dystopian novel written by George Orwell, who was an insider into the communist conspiracy. Now, communism is basically Judaism come into power. All of the major communists who were behind the communist revolution in Russia and throughout the world, international communism, are Jews. It's the Judaism that has come to political power. And so when he says we control matter because we control the mind, his point is that they don't actually control matter in actual sense. In other words, the world does not actually spin at 1,000 miles per hour, but they can convince people that it does. And so in that sense, they control matter because they can control the way people think. And so they control all the mass media. They control the educational system. And so from the beginning, when you show up in kindergarten or the first grade, you are presented with a globe. And then you were told about how the ancient savages, in their ignorance, thought the world was flat. But we're so much more enlightened now. And so they're conditioned to believe, well, if you think the world's flat, you're on the outs, you're dumbbell, you are a savage, see? And so that conditioning is very difficult for people to overcome. The whole society is built around this lie that we live on a globe. And so the idea is it's mind control, okay? It's mind control. And if you read the Bible, it says that say among the heathen, the Lord reigneth. And then it says, I'm reading from Psalms chapter 96, the world also shall be established that it shall not be moved. And then in the next sentence, he shall judge the people righteously. So the immovable earth is linked very closely with the righteous judgment of God. Well, what is part and parcel of the righteous judgment of God is punishment for sin. If people understood that the world was flat, they would understand that God is righteous and he punishes sin, you see. And so it would be an internal reign on people's actions. But one of the things the devil wants is the devil wants people to act up. He wants people to create anarchy. He wants people to commit crime. Why? Because the more crime, the more things that are done against other people, the more the government must inject itself into our lives to protect the innocent, you see. So the more that there is anarchy, the more that there is chaos, the more that there is sin, the more is the need for external control by the government. So there is a reason for this. If you conceal from men the existence of God, then they're less likely to put a governor on their own conduct. They're more likely to act out. They're more likely to do things for their own pleasure to the detriment of another person, which calls for the government to step in and protect that person, which means we have more government control, less freedom, and that brings about tyranny. Over time, the more people act out, that's why you have, for example, this movement for the sodomite community to legalize sodomy, legalize, you have legal now sodomite marriages. So that's just the first step. They're not done. The next thing is going to be legalizing pederasty, okay? And so it's not going to stop there. They have plans for other things. And so the more that people become sinful, the more there's a need for the government, you see. And so the government now has to step in and enforce these special new rights, these government-given rights to sodomites against the God-given rights of Christians to speak out against that sin, see. So this conflict is being generated artificially by the same people who are convincing people that the world is round and spinning. You have to step back and look at what is their end. Why would they do this? That's often asked. Well, you have to look at the big picture. Satan has an intergenerational conspiracy against God and man.
Absolutely. And that, speaking of Satan again, this is what some of my research I see when I go to look at the Star of David. That's when I start getting off into the Star of Remphan, and it starts connecting to Saturn, because you could find a bunch of references that Remphan is a term for Saturn. And Saturn seems to have this kind of cube, representation. I'm not sure how provable that is, or whatever, but there's a cube that goes with Saturn. And when you start looking at this cube and finding instances of it all over the place, and it's kind of in the middle of the star too, if you were to trace the star in a certain way, the hexagon in the middle turns into a cube. So there's this kind of...
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that. I have seen recently, and it's come to light only now because we have the technology to do it. The internet is kind of throwing a monkey wrench into Satan's plans, oddly enough. On YouTube, if you go and you look at some of the videos that they have of these cameras now have such powerful lenses, and they do not cost much. They can zoom in on these stars, and you can have video, and you can watch the stars and the planets. And what's very clear when you look at them is they are not terrestrial. They are light. There's some kind of light. And the suggestion when you look at them, the suggestion that comes to mind is they're in water. That it appears to be waves going across it. And I have actually seen a video of a wave going across the moon. It's the most amazing thing, which confirms, by the way, what the Bible says about the firmament being put between the waters that are on the earth and above the earth. So when you look at the blue sky, that blueness is water. That's my inference, and I get that from what the Bible says. I've never been up there, and that we've never been in space. There is no space. And if you ever look at a launch of an Apollo rocket, I never, when I was a kid, I always thought, this is very strange. I didn't understand it. I just believed what I was seeing and what they were saying, rather not what I was seeing, because what I was seeing was contrary to what they were saying. The rocket doesn't go straight up. Have you ever noticed that those rockets, they go up and then they're on a parabola and they end up going now parallel to the ground, and then ultimately the nose starts dipping down before it gets out of camera range? It's the oddest thing. And I think it's evident that those rockets don't go into space, that they're shot off into the ocean, and that nobody's the ISIS space station. It's a big fraud. In fact, I saw a video one time where they were cutting to the International Space Station, and they cut to what appeared to be some kind of shed with a camera on a track with a globe next to it. And they said, "Oh, that's not the International Space Station," and then they cut away. And I've been trying to find that video. I saw it once, and I can't find it again. I thought, oh, I'll come back and look at it. Well, I can't find it. Somebody posted it on YouTube. I saw it once, and I haven't been able to find it since. I've typed in all kinds of search terms, and I don't know what happened to it.
I've seen the video. I will find it and send it your way. Yeah, that was a good one.
Great.
That was definitely a good one. And yeah, you could tell those rockets are definitely going into the Bermuda Triangle kind of area in the open ocean. You know, they're shooting it directly into the most open area of ocean water, and you watch it go down. You watch it. It doesn't go straight up or out, just like you're saying. It just arcs over and heads out of your view, and finally to its resting place in the ocean.
Right.
It's crazy.
And I'm sure you're aware of what many researchers have uncovered with regard to the astronauts who supposedly died in the
Challenger 6.
Yeah,
yeah,
and that each one of them are still alive. That's the most amazing thing. It's just amazing, astounding, actually, when you think about it.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest things for me I can't believe they actually do this. I mean, it helped me see with this whole reality, you know, when other YouTube channels are making videos about how most news events are fake, you know, stuff that the news is covering all the way from shootings and stuff. It's all fake, and there's actors. So it gives credence to that, you know, because that you can't debunk that, man. Those people didn't have twin brothers and sisters, and you know, they claimed some of them did, and that's just absolutely insane. Snopes tried to debunk that, and it's just that's another way that you could just see the controlled opposition, like Metabunk, you know, and Snopes.
Right. And I'd be interested to read what they have to say about that. That would be hilarious.
It's on there. You could go look at it. It's absolutely mind-boggling how they try to dismiss it and say it's just a conspiracy theory.
Well, think about it. If they can convince the world that the people in the world that the Earth is a spinning ball going at 1,000 miles per hour, while at the same time it's rotating around the sun at 67,000 miles per hour, while the sun in turn is supposed to be hurtling through the Milky Way at 500,000 miles per hour, while the Milky Way itself is supposed to be going at between 300,000 and over 1,000,000 miles per hour, and that all of that spinning is being done while the North Star, which is 400 light years allegedly away, stays fixed over the North Pole. You just stop and think about it. If they can do that and convince people that we are spinning on this globe, then everything else, every other conspiracy, every other lie is child's play. They've got us, you see.
Yeah, sad but true. I have a friend that he makes YouTube videos, and I was talking with him. His name is NorCal Waters. Real name is Caleb. Wanted to give him a shout out because he read your book and he sent me a few questions in my email. So I was just going to ask you a couple questions from him that he wanted to hear you answer. Here's the first one. Concerning the body of information coming from the space agencies of the world combined and their fraudulent nature, do you suspect that there are those within these agencies which are leaving breadcrumb trails of imagery manipulation as a means or a cry for help? Many assume top to bottom trust or distrust concerning these sectors. What about the anomaly within these agencies? Surely someone has a heart and is leaving the smallest messages to decode. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I can't say because they're not talking, but I can only guess that some of the things, some of the anomalies, and some of the things that I've come across are so obvious that it has to be done on purpose. but I can't say for certain that it's done on purpose. I mean, you just take an example of like for instance, the foreground picture taken during one of the moonwalks, where it's a day apart and supposed to be almost 4 or 5 kilometers away, and it's the exact same scene. How can they make such a dumb error? It can't be stupidity. It had to be on purpose. I mean, are they really that dumb? There's another one where they show the approximately 7 days apart, the exact same image of the Earth, the exact same image. So whatever the transparency they used in order to portray the Earth, they used 7 days apart, once on the way to the moon and another time on the way back. And if you look at the two next to each other, there's exactly the same cloud formations. They can't be that dumb. They had to have done that on purpose. Somebody had to have, but I don't know. I can't say for sure because I don't know the motivation. But some of the things may be breadcrumbs.
Absolutely, I feel the same way.
That's a very good point. I can't say for sure until you actually talk to the people.
Yeah, it seems like there's people that are in the know, whether it's maybe the anomaly musician or the anomaly, someone in Hollywood that, they're totally part of this beast system, yet they, there's just that strange, unique one that has a bit of a heart, and they try somehow to leave a clue or something. So I could see it, but there's no way to prove it.
Well, understand this too. The Bible states that fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. So if they don't fear the Lord, they're really stupid. So they could be just plain stupid. See, understand there's a difference between being very powerful and being very knowledgeable. Those are two different things. Just because they have people beneath them who they use as their subordinates, and they use the knowledge of these people, doesn't mean that they themselves who are running this conspiracy are terribly smart. They're not. They're just ruthless, okay? And they have tapped into a spiritual darkness, because we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and the darkness of this world, okay? And so these spiritual powers give them tremendous power, but not necessarily knowledge and wisdom. So a lot of these errors, who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, that's true. Here, I got another one from NorCal. What type of personality or psychological structure would be needed to participate in this hoax as an astronaut? Are there any kind of specific indicators that you suspect?
Well, if you understand that most of the astronauts, well, I can't say most. Actually, maybe I can, because I can't think. Actually, I can't think of one that was not a Freemason. Can you?
No.
I can't think of one that was not. Allegedly, Neil Armstrong was not a Freemason. However, I've heard him be referred to as a fellow brother by the Freemasons. So even he, who I can't confirm was a Freemason, may have been a Freemason. But anyway, be that as it may, to be a high-level Freemason, you have to go through stages. And so and as they go through these stages, one of the things that they ask for is more light at each stage, okay? So, well, at some point, it's revealed to them who is the light bearer. Now, if you know, Lucifer literally means light bearer. So as they go through their stages, at each stage, there's some part of their conscience which becomes seared. Okay, so basically they have to prove themselves at each stage. So it's sort of a screening process, Freemasonry is, so you never get to the higher levels of Freemasonry unless you're able to prove yourself through these stages. See, that's the whole point of the stages of Freemasonry. So when you go through up to the 33rd degree of Freemasonry, when you get to that degree, it's revealed to you who it is that they worship, and that is Lucifer. See, because they're constantly asking for light. I want more light. And they're revealed some aspect of who it is that's behind Freemasonry until it's ultimately revealed it's Lucifer. Now, there's a point at which they have proven themselves, and that therefore now they're going to be in on the secret, in on, okay, here are our plans. And so they'll be given a compartmentalized portion of the plan, not the whole thing. Only Satan knows the whole plan, okay? You're familiar with intelligence agencies where they have things compartmentalized, where what one compartment does, each person knows only enough to do their job, and it's called a need-to-know basis. Well, that's the way Satan's kingdom is set up, okay? So every person in this conspiracy, satanic conspiracy to control the world, they only know that part that Satan thinks they need to know. The big plan is known by him. And of course, if you get higher and higher in the hierarchy, they know more and more, okay? Now, the astronauts know just enough to be useful in the conspiracy. They know enough to go along with the program, to be deceptive. Now, they're very well paid, okay? They get paid well, they get fame, their family is taken care of, they're supported. So there's a lot that goes along with this to be an astronaut and be in the program. And they know, because they've learned through the lessons of others, that if they cross and they do something that reveals any part of this secret, or then they can be killed. And that has happened.
Yep. They kind of get a lot of blackmail on these guys, right? So they could hold it against them later.
Now you've now raised another interesting point. I believe that at a certain point, when they think that they become useful, that's one thing they do, is they have some terrible crime, some terrible infraction, some terrible thing that they've done. Oftentimes it's set up by their controllers so that they are involved in something where now they hold that over them. In Washington, D.C., you can consider Washington, D.C. as blackmail central. There are more hotel rooms and rooms that are wired for sound and video than anywhere else. And these politicians, they go there, they get set up. Once they then engage in whatever this nefarious conduct will be, they now have them, okay? So blackmail is big. So they offer them the carrot or the stick. And yes, that's as old as time, this idea of blackmail. And nobody gets to a very high level in politics unless they have something they're holding over them. Yes, some terrible crime, some terrible deed. Yes.
Absolutely. All right. So let me think. I had something I wanted to ask you. Oh, yeah, I've been watching a few videos from one of my favorite YouTube channels called Truth Media Revolution, and they've been covering a lot of Trump lately and how most of pretty much all of his cabinet members are Zionist Jews or Ashkenazi Jews or something. And I thought that was pretty wild. How do you feel about Trump? Have you been looking into all the aspects of what this is bringing to the New World Order as far as him being president?
Well, here is my guess on that. I believe Trump would not be president if it weren't for the Zionist Jews that back him. Very powerful Zionist Jews are behind his presidency. And I don't believe that he is as independent as he is portraying himself. I believe that the United States, right? Understand this: the United States is insolvent. The United States government, it's insolvent right now as we speak. If anybody was in the economic condition that our federal government is in now, and this country is in, they would have to declare bankruptcy. They cannot exist. The debt is just too massive. So understand that the government is insolvent. Well, that's and it's anytime they want to pull the cord, then it can, our entire economic system can collapse. The problem is the Zionist Jews are not ready for the U.S. to collapse just yet. they still haven't finished the job. They've got Iran they want to take care of. They got Syria they want moved out of the way. There are things that they need the United States to do for them. Well, the only way the U.S. can do that is if it buys time and is in some way rejuvenated economically. And that may be the purpose of Donald Trump. So what he's doing, yes, does benefit the country because they're not ready for us to economically collapse just yet. And so, yes, they need jobs being brought back here. Yes, they need industry being brought back here because it is all being offshore. Okay, it's being moved offshore. It's clear. It's clear that over the last 50 years that businesses have been flooding overseas. Understand that corporations are artificial entities created by the state. And once you understand that, you understand that you as a citizen of the United States are not as favored over a corporation. Corporations are given special privileges. Give you an example. A corporation can deduct all of their expenses against their income and only have to pay income tax on the income after their expenses. Well, you, as an ordinary citizen, you don't get to deduct your food, your lighting, the things that you need in order to exist. No, you get taxed on the income, and you don't get to deduct your expenses. You see, you're not treated the same way. And so I don't want to get off on a tangent, but my point is, yes. Now, could Trump double cross his handlers? That is a possibility. We saw that. That's what happened with John Kennedy. John Kennedy also had Zionist Jews supporting him. However, from the get-go, he was not going to do what they wanted him to do. In fact, he double-crossed them, and that's why he was assassinated. Now, will Trump do that? I don't know. Is he going to be independent? Will he yield at a point at which they want him to now send us into another massive war? I don't know. Time will tell. I don't have, they don't invite me to their conspiracy meetings, and there's no doubt they have them. But we'll have to see. One thing about Donald Trump, some of the things he's done are, they're good. And my hope is that he continues to do good things. My concern is that he does other things that he apparently has said he's going to do. So I have concerns both ways. I don't trust him. I don't trust any politician. But the one thing about him, however, is that he has kind of kept his promises, which is really surprising. Because if you'll notice, for all the presidents up till Trump, they have gone back on promise after promise after promise. Even Ronald Reagan was a complete fraud. People talk about him as a paragon of conservatism. He was a liberal governor of California, and he was play acting as a conservative president, but he did nothing but raise taxes, grow government. He was a liberal, a closet liberal, and people didn't see that. They portrayed Bill Clinton as a moderate. He was practically a communist. So you can't go by what the media tells you. He's absolutely right that the media is completely controlled, and he calls them now fake news, which I think is hilarious. He's now turned the term that they use against real news done by real investigators who are not part of the corporate media. They initially called them fake news. Now it's being turned on them, and he calls them fake news, which I think is hilarious. But again, yes, I believe he is controlled by Zionist Jews. We'll just have to see what happens.
Yeah, whether we're in trouble or not it might not be the case.
Yeah,
but
is he going to be a John Kennedy, or is he going to be a Ronald Reagan?
Yeah, I feel like either way he's going to be taking us one more step towards where they want us to be, whether it looks good during that time or not, like you were saying,
Yeah.
So is there anything you'd like to say? Is there anything you're working on before we get out of here?
No, I appreciate you having me on, and this this issue of flat Earth is very important, because once people understand that the Earth is flat, they'll start asking, well, then why was I lied to? And then all of the other conspiracies that the governments of the world are involved in become so clear, and it becomes so clear what their objective is. So that's very important. And ultimately, they'll come to a knowledge of Jesus Christ, and that's my hope.
Good stuff. Yeah, it was a pleasure to have you on, and keep in touch, man. We could do this again sometime.
Thank you.